Hoy contamos con la presencia de Poornima. Bueno, Miguel, si quieres empezar con la intro y después pasamos a la charla.
Gracias, Flor. Hola a todos. Welcome, Poornima, to our webinars of ADVA. Este año estamos retomando este ciclo que nació el año pasado a partir de la pandemia y bueno, hoy estamos recibiendo en este espacio a Poornima Sitaraman. Ella es directora de diseño en Singa y además, bueno, tiene un recorrido por la industria internacional muy interesante y es embajadora de Women in Games. Ella está localizada en India y nos va a estar contando toda su experiencia y su recorrido. Así que estamos muy contentos y le damos una cálida bienvenida desde Buenos Aires y desde Argentina en general. Yo estoy en Buenos Aires. Gracias por Nima. Thank you.
Bueno, por mi parte voy a pasar a inglés, así hacemos la introducción con Poornima y podemos pasar a la presentación. ¿Sí, Miguel?
Quería contarles a los que se están sumando, va a haber espacio para preguntas y respuestas al final de la exposición que va a hacer Poornima, así que pueden ir dejándolas por el chat, las preguntas que les vayan surgiendo a medida que ella va presentando, y luego entre Flor y yo vamos a ir moderando esas preguntas y Poornima las irá respondiendo. Nada más.
Perfecto. Muchísimas gracias, Miguel. Hi, Poornima. How are you? Well, first of all, thank you so much once again to join us in this conversation. And like Mia said, you're in India and your time zone is a bit different from ours. So thank you so much for adjusting your schedule. Like Mia said, today we're super eager to learn more about your story, about your background, and how you made it through your professional workspaces and your different experiences and the companies that you've been working throughout the years, and how you became the director at Singa, and how you're collaborating at Women in Games today. So welcome, and I'm going to turn off my camera right now so that you can share your screen. And like I said, everyone is going to be sharing their questions once you finish with your session. So thank you very much.
Sounds good. Thank you. Thanks for having me here. Right. Hey everyone, really glad to be here. So we're going to be talking about, one of the most popular memes that has been happening, especially during this COVID times, which is how it started versus how it's going. So I thought we will just structure the narrative on that itself. We're going to start with this. Like, a lot of you might wonder, who is this person, besides whatever reference you have had when the speaker announcement has been made. Before we get into who I am today, let's dive a little back into the past, right? Like, let's go back to how it all began. So in this rewind mode, I'm going to start off with a story. So there are going to be 4 small stories that I'm going to share with you today. And I would like to say that these are my 4 dominoes that has made me who I am. Of course, there are more such things, but these 4 are crucial. So I come from a small village. That's where I was born and raised in India, in the south of India. And this is how my village looks. This is a more recent picture. So it's pretty fun, lovely atmosphere. We also belong to a community where education is prioritized. So that is something my parents also focused on. But it was also an Orthodox society where, wearing something like a jeans, especially at that time, was almost unheard of. So I remember my dad had gone to the city to work. He was working at the bank, and he had gone to the city, and he happened to see some girls, and this was like the new age of wearing jeans. Like, that's something new that had come into India, and some of the city girls were the first ones to adopt it. So when he saw that, he said, "Hey, I'm going to pick it up for my daughter." So he came back from there and he came back home to the village, and he's like, "Hey, here's something new." And I think I never really thought of it as anything else. I'm like, "Oh, this is some new thing to wear, and I tried it out. I was the first one in my entire village and my school, the first girl to wear jeans. And I think I broke some barriers that day without even realizing it. And I think it happened because of my dad, where he said if someone else could, then how does it matter that my daughter is the first one to do it here? It really didn't bother him that much. So he's like, if it's valid, maybe you should give it a shot as well. So that's the story of jeans. I mean, at that point, I didn't realize it was breaking a barrier or setting an example, because after that, I had more of my friends, and slowly everyone started adopting, because sometimes it just takes one person to stand up and do it. And then the next person, the follower, is just as important. And then eventually everyone picks it up. So something as small as this can create a larger impact in life, where it's okay to be the first one to do it. And just because no one else has done it doesn't mean that you can't. Right? So that's my first domino. The second one, like I already mentioned, our community believes in a good education. But, and especially my mother, she really, really wanted to study. But due to her financial conditions and all of that, they couldn't. And we come from a society where marriages have happened, like arranged marriages. So she was married off. As she came of age, she was married off. She never got to study, but that eagerness to study continued with her. Of course, like when family happened, she had me, like my sister, me, and all of that. She kept postponing that, but I think at no point did she ever lose the urge to study. So in her late 50s, my mom actually decided to do her degree. She did a DEd, she did a master's, and she also did some other training courses. So she's currently uh, someone in our family who holds multiple degrees. I am extremely proud of her for that, because I think age didn't matter to her. She kept having that goal. I mean, it would have been great if could have got that early on, but she didn't lose hope. She wanted to do it. She had that goal in her mind. She worked towards it. There was a delay in that goal. She had other priorities, responsibilities, and all of that. But it didn't matter. At the end, she did achieve. And even at 55 years, she managed to clear something and even aced at it. She actually came out in the top list of merit as well. So it was a great experience to see that in your mother, right? To see that strength coming from someone like her, and that kind of creates an impact on you. That's my second domino. The third one I would say is this was back when I was in school. I was probably in my fifth grade, I would say. And I had a habit of, I was a bit of a teacher's pet, and I wanted to impress the teacher. So I used to always read up the chapters before they're going to teach. And this was particularly a poetry, which was in one of the South Indian regional languages. And I went through it. I had my own interpretation of the poetry. And then my teacher actually explained it, and she put together an interpretation of it. And the whole thing, I was completely thinking that, my interpretation when I read the poetry the day before and thought about it, it was very different from the interpretation she gave me. I mean, there were some lines of connection, but it just felt like it was a whole other meaning. So I started to doubt, like, did I understand this wrong? Was I wrong in understanding it this way? And that kept troubling me. So when the class got over, I went to my teacher and I asked her, and she just very calmly sat me down and spent some time with me and said, okay, what was your interpretation? And I explained to her what I thought the poetry meant. And she said, oh, that's a lovely interpretation. And she's like, yeah, that's really good that you came up with it on your own. I was like, but that's not something that you explained. You gave us a very different interpretation of it. She's like, yeah, so what is your problem exactly? I said, so which is right and which is wrong? She's like, see, that's the best part about art. art is always about the person who consumes it versus the creator. The creator creates it keeping something else in mind. Some of the people who consume it might get the same inclination, but some will get very different. And if you think about it, this is not too different from games. When we create it as game designers and developers, we have some certain notions. A part of it definitely is something even our players consume. But oftentimes we understand players can find their own player experience, their own growth, their own narrative that may not have been intended by the game designer, but still the environment gives them that. And that's the beauty of art. And I think because of my teacher, I realized it's okay to be different. It's okay to have different opinions on the same thing. And it's perfectly fine because it's not about which opinion is right or wrong, right? In certain cases, yes, of course, it's more binary, but in things like this, when it is open to interpretation, open to opinions, to be respectful of everyone's interpretations, to be creative in creating your own interpretation. So this was also a great life lesson for me. So this was my third domino. And then my fourth domino, which kind of leads me, this is probably more relevant to me being in games. Um, I think when I was in my 12th grade, which is one of the more crucial educational timeframes in India, and right before the uni, right? So at that point, we were, my mom and dad, they had uh, saved up money to get me a personal computer for academic reasons because I needed to use it. I was pursuing my, like I said, my 12th grade, and I was going to go into engineering. So they had actually got me the system. Uh, Obviously, with the system, I had my friends who introduced me to uh, games like Age of Empires and Warcraft 3. But previously, I used to play, like, we used to get these NES clones for much cheaper prices in India. They used to like go bad in like after a few uses, but they were like dirt cheap. So I used to play like some of the Mario and Duck Hunt games on that, and even the Game Boy clones had Tetris and all of that, but never really thought of it anything more. Right? These were simple, fun games that I played with family. It was good. But with the PC, when Age of Empires and Warcraft 3 and games like Zeus came in, it suddenly changed my perception of games. I felt like, oh, it's not limited to this. It can go so much more. Like there is a entire spectrum of games, right? Like basically anywhere from something as simple as a Tetris to something complicated like an RTS or an RPG. And so Age of Empires 2 particularly is very close to me because my friend, he taught me how to play it. And as he taught me how to play, I started realizing that I can get better at it. I trained myself to get better at it. I used to compete with him, and at some point, I used to be better than him. What happened out of this is that he, like another friend, we used to go play at a land cafe, and they used to team up as allies to try and conquer my base and all of that. And I used to still win. But at no point did he or the other friend ever make me feel that I'm not good enough because of my gender or anything. In fact, they saw me as a true competitor, and playing with me made them want to beat me to get better at the game. And it had nothing. So I felt like they set me on equal footing. Like I was on the same field as them. I was just a proper competitor for them as they were for me. So the hierarchy that otherwise exists in terms of gender never really happened, right? So for me, that was a setting stone where I never felt that. We did feel it when we went to a cafe and we were against someone, another team, and they were not very sure, that I could play, and then they challenged us and we won that game. And it's okay, even if we had lost that game, it wouldn't have mattered. Like it, at the end of the day, those guys were also like, we are sorry, we just assumed that you can't play because you're a woman, and going forward we wouldn't. And the only thing I told them is like, yeah, at some point I couldn't play because we do not have the access to it, and especially as women it's even lesser. but my friends taught me how to play. And that's how I am here today. And when you're given access and opportunity, is the only way you can get better at it. You cannot just say that you can just jump into it and be the best person out there, right? And so that's, we will come to circle that back to the equality and gender gaps, right? So this was my fourth domino. So everything has an effect, right? A cause and effect, consequences. And this is true for bad things also, but let's not go there today. Um, I feel like the domino effect is so important because it sets you in a different way. Today, you are part of a game dev group. Maybe you are doing a game dev education. Somewhere, something has happened that has taken you here. Like, what's your journey? Something has happened. Maybe it is a person, maybe it is a thought, maybe it is a movie, maybe it is a game. All of these are some level of domino effect that has affected you to get to where you are today. Now, one thing I can be certain is that everything may not necessarily lead to success. We don't know that for sure. But what can we be sure of is that we can be a positive domino in someone else's life. That's a guarantee we can make. We can facilitate something better for someone else. When we do something, try and reaching out for ourselves, whether we will get it or not is still something that's left to fate and left to a bunch of other parameters. But if I am able to help someone else or not is up to us. So that's definitely something we know for sure we can do. And in many cases, the fight that we fight may not necessarily work out for us. So, case in point, so this is English movie called The North Country, in which it talks about the sexual harassment policy that was implemented because of, when women were working in mines. The real story goes, if you read up about it, it didn't really work out in their favor. It took so many years for the actual verdict to come through. By then half of them were dead. The other half had like lost hope and really didn't care. But it was the president to set up a sexual harassment policy. It is helping people like us, people like the current people in the US, right? That one woman who raised her voice, that has affected an entire more than one generation to come up with this kind of policy set. And if you kind of rewind further from there, even before the sexual harassment policy, women were not allowed to work in mines. So that also happened because some other woman decided to step in and raise the issue. And then of course we can talk about the African Americans, where there's another movie called the Marshall, and that's also brilliant, where you stand up for kind of people of color. There's so many things, and some of them we don't even know, right? Like we don't know what work they have done to be able to do this. Today, for me in India, I have a voting right as a woman. Someone stood up for it, someone fought for it, and I don't know whether they ever got to vote. But today I can because of them, right? So what they could guarantee is that something that they are doing can have a spillover effect for someone else. They themselves didn't know whether they would ever get to do that. So that is uncertain, but this is certain. So I would urge that become the domino for someone else, because someone else will become the domino for you, right? And also, I would say just rewind, figure out why you are here today. What has your journey been like? Because sometimes it's the afterthought that counts. Like when I was going through wearing my jeans for the first time, or listening to my teacher talk about the poetic, interpretation, or looking at my mom studying at 55 and 60 years, and like my friends treating me on equal footing with respect to gaming. When I was going through this, I did not feel any different. Like I didn't think it in such a deeper way, in a more philosophical way. But now that I go back, I'm thinking about all of that and trying to connect those dots to see how that has transformed me into the person I have become today. Right. And like I said, the negatives also get there, but that's for another day. Now that we went about how it has been. Let's go slowly into the how it's going narrative, right? So I'm going to just split my journey. Um, so, like I said, it all started with Age of Empires and Warcraft 3. My first opportunity at game design happened with a South Korean company that was based off India, and we were working on a role-playing game for the mobile, and it was based off Dungeons and Dragons. So I started out as a programmer, and they gave me the opportunity to be a game designer there. I gave it a shot. They really liked it, and I think that's when I fell in love. Like game design, I found my thing as game design, right? My love as game design. From there, I worked on, Bioshock Mobile, uh, worked on titles like The Office, Predator, Godzilla, Mercury Meltdown. These are some of the older games that used to be there, and we had worked on the mobile versions for these on Brew platforms. This is back in, say, 2006, 2007, I would say. So these are for brew platforms, mainly for the US market. So we were making that in India and delivering it there. Bioshock also won some awards. Office was nominated at the IMGA. And cricket, of course, because we are India, and so cricket and Bollywood becomes like some of the things we always pursue, and it makes good money for us. So that's where it was. So for Bioshock Mobile, when I talk about brew devices, I'm not even sure how many of you are aware of this, right? So in this in brew platform, the size basically we get is like about 4 MB max because of the Bioshock title. Otherwise, we have to make the whole game in 1 MB, and these are 3D games. So you can imagine how low poly, how smart we have to be with the rendering pipeline, with the FPS and all of that, and we have to port it to like a zillion devices, right? So we tried. So I'm going to just try and share a bunch of screenshots with you to show the comparison between the PC version and the mobile version. Expect it to be super low quality, but this is a time when no engines existed. So we made our own engine to actually make this happen. So I'll just share that with you. So yes, the one on the left is the PC version, and the one on the right is the mobile version that we created. This is our Big Daddy. Doesn't look as horrifying, but yeah, this is what we could do with the low poly versions. We worked with 2K very closely on this. We actually made it episodic much before episodic was a fashion and a trend. We had released everything as chapters, mostly because of space constraints rather than anything else. We even had to do things like, so in here, so in the original you can see that it is a see-through one, right? So we had to put a opaque door here because we could not support the kind of FPS where you could see the rest of the images also. We were only rendering what is visible, so, and where the player is facing. So we had so much calculation continuing to go on to make sure we attain the perfect FPS. We had, I think, the entire game, we really worked with the developers to set up triggers at every different point to make sure that we can uh, get that experience, because that's something 2K games really wanted us to get right: the story and the setup of this visual setting, the world setting of Bioshock. Yes, this is the other Big Daddy. Yep. So that's where it was. That's where we paused. And a very quick look to where I am now. In between that, I actually, so Pinaka and Namalore were some of two of my own startups that I did. Grow Life is my consultancy and also my website. So from after my game design consultancy, I joined a company called Knowledge Adventure. I worked on titles like, the franchises School of Dragons is based off How to Train Your Dragons, the Dreamworks franchise. Worked on Penguins of Madagascar, Neopets, which is huge in UK and US, and NFL, of course, it's a big deal in US. So we worked on projects like these. And School of Dragons is it's like an educational MMO RPG, I would say, and it was fully cross-platform. And that was brilliant. So we managed to pull that off at that time. After that, I moved to GSN, which is, it's social casino. It's game show networks, social casinos. I was working with them and facilitating new ideas there to improve retention and monetization for them. Then I took a break, started my own consultancy. I started my own game dev company. We were looking to make games that was based on gender equality and all of that. Unfortunately, things didn't work out. So after that, I took a bit of a break for a few months, and then I joined Zynga. And now I head their Farmville 2 Country Escape team. That's where this journey is. So these are just some of the shots of the games that I have worked on and currently working on, just to give an understanding. So the one thing I have been very grateful is I have got the opportunity to work on like really different types of games, especially for India. That's really hard because most of us now, the Indian game development works towards a certain set of genres that have that works really well in this market. For me, when I started, I think I've had the option to work on FPS, to RPGs, to puzzles, to free to plays, to sports, all of these categories. So I would say I'm pretty lucky and fortunate that way. So some of the roles I've played, I've been a gamer, obviously, that's how it all started. I've been a wedding planner, programmer, designer, student. I think I always will be a student because I don't think we should ever stop learning. Been a studio head, entrepreneur, speaker. But yeah, primarily, I think I would always just call myself a game designer. So one thing I keep telling in most of my talks is, to me, games are like dreams, right? And this again goes back to the narrative I was telling you about the poetry, where the whole interpretations can be different. So it's in dreams. If you and I share a dream, even if it is exactly same to the T, our experience could still be different, right? And that's the best thing about games, that it's like dreams where all of us can play the same game and walk out of it with a different experience. And sometimes, if we share the same experience, that's us categorizing someone as player types. There's battle player types and all of the different categorization we do. Is essentially that, right? Like we are thinking the same way, we are perceiving it the same way, we are trying to experience it the same way. So we are put into that category. So for me, I think games are wonderful mediums, right? And it's brilliant to be part of this ecosystem in any way, in any fashion, as the primary game dev unit or the auxiliary game dev unit, doesn't matter. I think just being related to it, to see the positive variations of what games can bring to people, it's just brilliant. It feels quite happy to be part of this, I would say. The other thing I keep talking about is something I have come up with, which I call the broad-minded spectrum. Um, Oftentimes, like this is a very common thing. I would say, how many of you play games? Um, more or less, most of them don't even raise their hand because they think playing a casual game is not really considered to be gaming. So they don't even raise their hands, right? But when I ask, like, oh, do you play any games on your mobile? Do you play any Candy Crush or something? More hands go up. So I think generally we have created an elitism about the type of gamers, right? So I would say it's not necessarily that way. I think, of course, games themselves are casual versus hardcore, depending on the learning that is there for it, right? But irrespective of the entry level barriers in terms of mechanics and tutorials, forgetting that, right? Like let's ignore that for a moment. Say they have overcome it, but now I could pick up a Skyrim and I don't need to necessarily ace it. I can just enjoy it. I can just enjoy the world. I can just walk around the world and do some basic quests and just enjoy the storyline, right? It's possible that I can pick up a AAA hardcore game like Skyrim. I can actually play it more on the casual spectrum as a player. But the same me, I could probably take a say Dota and play it at hardcore level. Or I could maybe even take a Candy Crush and play it at a hardcore level. So I think as players, depending on the game, depending on our mood, we can go anywhere on the spectrum. And we should be open to that. this is also an entry barrier we create for people to join the gaming industry, where we are saying you're not elite enough. But we don't need to. We actually have every kind of games existing, from hyper casual to AAA games. This is a wonderful market, a wonderful domain. We don't need to limit anyone entering this, right? And anyone can scale, learn if they understand the basics. So I would always recommend and encourage that if someone says, or they just play only mobile games, so they don't consider themselves gamers, it's okay. It's just a terminology. Call them players. Who cares? But make sure they feel validated. Make sure they feel they are part of the same umbrella, right? The other thing I try to do, and the reason I have come here, is these four things, right? The L2A2: listen, learn, analyze, assist. So, and this is also going back to a bit of my domino. So, listening and learning is so important. You have to listen to be able to, and when you're listening, you have to listen with an open mind. You should be okay to say that, okay, I can lead by example, but for that I need to understand, okay, I'm listening to your opinions, I have my own ways, and understand why someone has that kind of an opinion on it. So learn about it, right? Learn about what you can get better at. There's so many different variations you can take from just one word. Analyze. It's again going back to figure out why someone thinks of it in a different way. What is it that you can do better to enable someone else's life or make a design better? Keep analyzing, keep questioning why, right? Like, instead of, like, keep asking yourself, like, what can I fix? So more than why, ask why not. When someone says no, you can't do it, you should be like, why not? Right? Like, that should be the best way to go about it. And assist. I think that's really, really important. In some way, I have been assisted by so many people to get here. When others were trying to pull me down, it was because of this assist that I continued to be here. Struggle has to be too, like, struggle have also happens on your own level, right? But it always helps when you have someone assisting you. That help will give you more power to power through, get to where you actually have to be. So I always believe in leading by example and following these four mantras to get there. And yes, just quickly touching upon women in games. And yes, it is true. There is a glass ceiling that exists. In some cases, it's obvious. In some cases, it's not. In some cases, definitely companies are trying to fix that problem, and that's huge welcome change. So as a being a woman in games, so I would say, like, this is how people see me, and this is how it actually is. But it's nice to feel this way, like the superwoman that is there, right? But having to do this and to appear this way for others is a miraculous thing to happen. um, I've had enough of my struggles with respect to this, in terms of being validated, acknowledged, hurdles in terms of career growth, opportunities, and all of that. But it doesn't matter. I don't think it ever deterred me. Of course, I've had my hits of depression and feeling low. It's bound to happen. I'm human after all. But I think with the support system and the determination that, I have to do something now so that someone else doesn't have to suffer through this. And I can only fix the system if I am in the system, right? That does not mean that I'm going to take any harassment. Obviously not, and no one should, right? But it still have to power through, to fight against the odds, to fight against constant people who will try to bring you down, but ignoring them and finding the right support system, because they do exist. And with experience, I can say they definitely exist. And I'm been grateful to find some amazing people like that in my life. And they will help you. They will help you where you are, give you enough encouragement to do what you want. And it also is a self realization that we'll have to do, where we say, I'll have to take this step. Maybe we become the voice for those who do not have one, right? Maybe some of us have the courage to stand up while some don't. So we stand up for them. Someone has to. If we think a little too selfishly and decide not to stand up, none of the world will not improve, the society will not improve, the industry will not improve. And like I said, we want to make sure everyone decided to raise their voice. So that is critical, and I think this holds true irrespective of gender. So that's definitely something we need to focus on. And of course, equity for true equality. I think I had mentioned earlier about opportunities. That, it's not enough that you provide opportunity. You also need to provide them the mentoring, the training, and the ability to actually perform, because we do not necessarily have that. More or less, in most cases, men have the advantage and they are ahead in the race already. So if you're providing the same speed to the other genders, they are not going to catch up. If you go to game design terms, there's something called rubber banding, where in multiplayer racing games especially, they try to do that. If someone is leading really well, there is no way for the people behind to catch up. So the game tries to create a rubber banding effect to make sure the people behind have right opportunity to catch up and have a chance to get ahead. This is no different. That's exactly what I mean by equity for true equality. And only when we do that for every marginalized gender, for every diversity scenario, because sometimes it's not just gender, diversity can be in terms of race, in terms of socioeconomic background, and all of that, right? So giving the right opportunity for them is important. No one wants hand me ons. Like, no one's saying, like, oh, we are just giving it to you for free because of so and so reason. No, what we have to provide is enable them to perform, giving them the opportunity and the interest and the mentorship that is needed for them to get there. And that is where we will need that equity coming in. So now that we have covered how it has been going, sorry, this is how it's going right now. I am a director of design at Zynga. I have been, this is usually the slide I start off with, but I try to change things up because of our narrative. Um, 15 years of experience in the gaming industry. I have co-founded 2 studios. I am a Women in Games ambassador. I'm also a speaker, an educator, and a mentor. I worked on some of these games. I did cover some through the slides. I'm a Women in Games Global Hall of Fame inductee as of 2020, alongside some amazing names like Brenda Braithwaite and Audrey LaPrince, Beth Lindsay, and Sandy Chen. So it's amazing to be part of that ecosystem. And Jessica Hammer. Sorry, I missed out. I have also been the Mentor of the Year runner-up for 2020 by Women Tech Network, and I got a special recognition award again by the same organization. So yeah, this happened, and yeah, and a lot of that happened because I also was the first Indian to get something of this global acclaim. Uh, Another thing to beat the gender barrier. So, which is amazing. I mean, I did not expect this to happen, but when it happened, it feels like, you're the first Indian. I mean, there are some articles that definitely say first Pakistani, but it's still the first Indian. It doesn't matter uh, what it was, right? So it's an amazing feeling that in an industry that is male dominated per se, you become the first person from your country, from your continent. Like I think I'm also the first Asian. So to be part of something as amazing as this, so it can happen. If it can happen to me, it can happen to all of you, and that's definitely something as a takeaway. Um, so yeah, so now that we are here, what's next? I don't know. I'm currently enjoying my time at Zynga, working on some amazing things, working with a great team of people. But I do have a dream project, which is tentatively titled Madhuram, which is about Carnatic music, which is a South Indian classical music. And I wanted to marry it with games. My family comes from a musical background where my late aunt, she was a Carnatic music guru. So I wanted to marry that with, we also have something called Navrasa, which is 9 different emotions that every person essays, and it's usually used for dance and music. So I wanted to interpret and marry Carnatic music, South Indian culture, emotions, and all of that into games. So that's my dream project. I don't know when I'll get to make it, but I really hope someday I could. And yeah, that's where I will leave you. Thank you so much. Please feel free to reach out to me at my email ID, and this is my website. Yeah, that's pretty much it.
Thank you so much, Purmina. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Thank you, Prince. Yeah.
Great, because sometimes my headset likes to do some funny stuff. But thank you so much for sharing your journey and your professional story. I believe that we may have a couple of questions, so I'm going to switch into Spanish to encourage the people to, because they might be a little shy. Si tienen algunas preguntas, bueno, buenos días a todos y a todas los que se fueron sumando a lo largo de la presentación de Poornima. Muchísimas gracias. Si tienen alguna pregunta, la pueden ir dejando tanto en el chat en español como en inglés. La podemos hacer o ayudarlos a traducir si necesitan. Es ahora el momento. No sé, Miguel, si vos tenés alguna pregunta. Yo tengo una particular sobre el proyecto de género en el que estaban trabajando, pero si querés voy con eso. I have a question for you, Purnima. I wanted to know if you can share more details on, because you mentioned that you were working on a gender inclusive project that didn't work out, but I was interested to learn a little bit more about what were your goals or what were you trying to do with that team, if that's okay. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely fine. So what we were trying to do is in India, we have tier 2 and tier 3 cities where it is gender equality is more of a problem. Not to say that in cities it isn't, but it's more educated. People are slightly bit more open-minded. So the women in cities are comparatively having a voice compared to tier 2, tier 3 cities. The main problem lies with the younger generation because they are nurtured to think that way. It's harder to change the adult mindset, but it's we can start putting in that seed, planting that seed in the thought of these young minds. Because when we had gone to interview these kids in schools, they were talking about, yeah, girls shouldn't wear short skirts. They shouldn't step out of the house after it gets dark. These are things that we are trying to put into the heads of these young kids without even knowing why, right? And even the girls feel that they are responsible if something bad happens to them. So we want to figure out why this happens. And in India, like in some other countries as well, if it is a girl, you're expected to do household chores before you can get to play. And if there is a system that's usually going to the boy before you get access to it. So if the access is already taken away, how can they even think of pursuing something that needs that kind of a system and needs you to spend time on that? So we're doing like a visual novel kind of a thing with some mechanics as well, planning to tie up with schools to run this. It's like a interactive storytelling game, but the choices are completely up to the players. We did put in some consequences of it, but we were telling them stories about what would actually happen if you decide to help out your sister versus choosing not to help her out. If you choose not to help her out, there's no negative impact, but there will still be like a small dialogue of her just asking you, why didn't you? Like, we leave it at that. We don't go deeper into the morals of you should do this, you shouldn't. We don't want to do that. We just want to plant that thought on asking, why not? Right? Like, we want to leave it at that and let the kids interpret and start asking these questions, or at least have that seed of doubt on why do we follow this archaical norms, right? So that was the larger intention. And the same goes for things like, boys don't cry, boys have to be macho and all of that. So we were trying to tackle all of this together.
Well, thank you so much for your answer and sharing more details on that project. Sounds super interesting. We have a couple of questions for you as well from the audience. And here, Matthias wants to know, where do you find inspiration? He's interested in your creative process after so many years in the industry.
So it's a very interesting question, and I think I try to. It's going to be a very uh, cliche answer that I try to draw inspiration from everything, but it is true. And some, I think, majorly from music and maybe movie and TV shows. I would say I have a strange affiliation to fantasy. I think of everything in a very fantasy world where I control the world. So I have very lucid dreams as well. I can remember I have an entire blog dedicated to my dreams. So I make up stories of my dreams. And I think for me, getting lost in that magical world is where I draw my inspiration from. And music is like a great thing for me. Depending on what I'm working on, I tune into a separate kind of music and it brings something into me to make me work towards it. So, yeah, definitely these.
Thank you so much. Well, I hope, Matthias, if you have any follow-up questions, just let us know. We have a question from Giuseppe from Peru. Hi, Giuseppe. Thanks for joining. He wants to know, what age were you, or how old were you when you started designing video games, and what was your first approach to that experience?
So I started officially designing maybe when I was 21, 22, maybe. And unofficially, I would say it would be around 16, 17. I think that's when I started to design campaigns for Age of Empires. And I used to make that and share it with my friends, take feedback, correct it, and then take it back to them. So, but I didn't know I was doing any part of game design at that point. Professionally, it was at 22. And the experience was amazing. Like, I started out as a programmer, like I said, and I still remember just falling in love when I opened my Dungeons and Dragons book. I think that's when I decided, no, I want to do game design. I feel like I have found my path. Like, this is what I want. And it goes back to like what I said about drawing inspiration and my obsession with fantasy. And I think Dungeons and Dragons did that to me. It just got that home for me when I said, what a wonderful world. And it's like a never ending world. Like, I used only a small part of the entire Faerun into my game. And I was just thinking, like, as a designer, I could be God. I could create that world for others to play. And I think that thought just made me fall in love with it.
That's an excellent story. Thank you, Purnima. We have another question from Alexis. He wants to know if you could elaborate a little bit further on what you mentioned about mentorships. What did you mean for your journey, and what did it mean for your journey, and how or when did you start mentoring others yourself? Thank you.
So I think I really had the problem, like I lacked having a mentor when I was growing in this industry, right? Like, I think I would have gone to places faster, have got better advice from people if I had that mentorship. My mentorship, having said that, I did get some amount of mentorship and encouragement from my teammates, from my colleagues, from my seniors who advised me on certain aspects. But having someone in my field advise me more closely would have really helped me get to the next level faster. Like, mostly I had to just get my hands dirty and figure it out for myself. So then it didn't really cross my mind until that opportunity came to me, because half the time you don't even know those opportunities exist. So I remember, like, one of the premier institute here called the National Institute of Design, they had reached out to me in 2015 to be officially having me on board as their visiting faculty, because they just got started with a game design course. So since then, I have been associated with them, and then after that, multiple universities. And I also try to mentor people offline as well, like through emails or social media and all of that, whenever I can get time, or at least point them to the right direction, right? Today, thankfully, we have a lot more sources of YouTube, of different course sites that we have to get this opportunity, and even colleges. Now it is becoming more prominent. And Sometimes mentorship can happen even with single advice with industry veterans, where they can tell you like, okay, this is not something new, all of us go through it, some form of encouragement to know the industry side of things. So yeah, I started in 2015 on a more official format, and now I try to do more of it. Time, of course, is a bit of a luxury for me, but I really do try to be a project guide for my students, take some workshops for them whenever I can. I try doing all of these for these students who grow on to, some of them have joined Zynga. Some of my students from 2015 are now part of the Zynga team. Some have actually gone abroad and they're like, working with some larger companies. So it's amazing to see them grow and attain that, and to even be able to contribute to 1% of what that is amazing. So I hope that answers your question.
Yes, thank you so much. And well, I know that you mentioned just college, and I know I don't want to put you in the spot right now, but I wanted to learn more. Maybe if you can share more details about the local ecosystem, in terms of education, if you have any sort of formal training or any recommendations or anything that you would like to share. And specifically, also, I would like to know if you have any information regarding women representation on your country. But again, I don't want to put you in the spot. You can share
No, that's
those
fine.
details
So
later
So
if you
I
want.
think with gaming, in terms of that being picked up as a college or a academic opportunity, it's not as prominent, but it is definitely getting better. The male to female ratio, even with respect to students, is not that great, and that obviously reflects in the industry too. I mean, the global average itself is roughly 20%, and India is much lower. But it's definitely getting better. So we do have, like, even Zynga drives an amazing diversity policy. So we really try to bring in the best talent and to come on board with a more diverse set of people. Like I said, going beyond gender also. So we are trying to get all of that sorted. But the other part is that sometimes, especially with respect to, say, game design or programming, we do not find enough women generally to hire also. So that is a problem we need to fix. So I have also, we've tried, there are some organizations that run like a school wide game design competition where they train them for like a day or two and then have like a hackathon, a game jam kind of a thing, where the students participate, including women. And then I recently met up with another amazing lady who is helping girls learn robotics. And they are trying to make games using robotics. So these kind of smaller things are happening, but I think for it to affect on a larger scale, we need to really generate awareness. So I always say there are two things. One, at the grassroots level, where you have to create awareness across, because in India, gaming is still treated as something that you do as a part time, as a entertainment, and often something that you do when you don't want to study. Um, so today, if you want to pursue cricket or any, say, become a musician, parents are okay to give you the right kind of training to do that. But when you say if you want to pursue game development or you want to be a professional gamer, they frown on it, right? Because they themselves don't know the opportunity that exists. They feel like someone's going to waste their life by just playing games. So that awareness needs to come from all levels. And also, to kids who play this, we have to say that, everything comes with the right balance. Games are good, but you need to make sure you put in specific time for everything. You cannot just spend all your life playing games. So those kind of smaller things that we need to iron out. And then on the other side, I feel like we definitely need more women in leadership, and more marginal genders, more diverse audience in leadership, because no matter how many allies you have, the person who has gone through that problem is the only one who will identify the problem and relate with it faster. So I think these two problems have to be fixed for the intermediate pool to start. And on that note, I also keep saying that we have had few people who try to get ahead, even women, but they only look after themselves because they are on this race to be equal with the man. that they sometimes even push back other women, right? And it's lonely at the top. At that point, you're going to reach there and stagnate there, and then there is no one. Instead, it's okay. Your journey might be slightly slower, but take more people with you. And then you will be in a much better spot because they will take more people with you, with them. And then, it's like going to be like a good way of a pyramid scheme, right? So, yeah.
Yeah, I'm nodding. Like I want to hug you. Like I love all about this session and the questions that came afterwards. We have two more questions, but we just reached the time, so I wanted to check with you, Poornima, if you
That's
have
fine.
a couple of minutes. Thank you so much. Well, we have a pretty interesting question from Gabriela here. She wants to know what you think about creating quota policies to encourage inclusion in the industry. I know it's related to what you were just saying.
So, sorry, could you say that again?
Yeah, sorry. She wants to know what you think about creating quota policies to encourage inclusion in the industry.
Oh yeah, I think I definitely agree to it, right? Like we have to get this sorted, and uh, especially sometimes, some of the things where women are not considered to be hired is in India we have a maternity policy. We get like a 6 month maternity leave. So by naturally, like if you come in and you're like a married person or someone who might potentially have a child, you're like, oh, she might just go on a maternity leave and 6 months we'll have to find someone else, right? The company offers the policy, but sometimes the hiring manager can mess it up, right? So one of the things I keep talking to other people who are trying to hire for diversity, I said it doesn't just stop at the company initiative. It has to happen where the hiring managers are also informed because they are the ones taking the interview. They can just very easily say, no, they didn't do the interview good, right? It's as simple as that. And this is where we need to create that equality, and I think Sweden does it great, where all of that policies are much better, and it's a much equal world. The way we can make it better for women is, we provide, say, like uh, a nursing center in the office, like you have a child daycare in the office, and things like that. I mean, of course, indie setups cannot do that, but larger corporates can. And once you do that, it's about bringing more women, bringing more of these diverse people, enabling them to work and without any judgment. So, having these policies are very important, especially harassment policies, whether it is sexual or mental or work related, any of that, right? Having these in order is very critical to make people feel it's safe for them, that they can be themselves without any kind of prejudice. So that becomes very critical, and we need to enforce this largely as a collective. And I think crunch culture is another thing that everyone is against, and we are trying to create unions, game unions, to prevent crunch culture because we glorify it. We think, oh, we crunch so hard, like we think it's an amazing thing to do, but kills you from inside. Downtime is underrated. People just think that powering through work is all that is needed, but when you take that pause, you come back much more refreshed and perform better. So I think all of these need to come together. Slowly, we are getting there into a much better work-life balance, much better diverse ratio, but it is a process.
Yes, I totally agree. Thank you so much, Purnima. We have one more question, and that's gonna be the end of our session today. Thank you so much, everyone, for staying a couple of minutes longer, and especially you, Purnima. Matthias wants to know, which skills do you think are important to teach kids slash adults to increase media alphabetization in a video game environment?
To increase what, sorry?
Alphabetization.
Could you elaborate that?
To educate more because he's talking about illiterate people that may not have access to education. So he wants to know how to improve that through a video game ecosystem, maybe for adults and maybe children as well.
Interesting question. That's actually a wonderful question. I don't know if I have the answer to it, but wonderful question. Thank you for that. Uh, what I would think of is I think, like music, games can be without any language barrier. One of the best examples was this mobile game called Florence. It was a brilliant game that was just put together. There's no text, nothing, and you just play through it. Same with Journey, same with Gris, Ori. Ori still had text, but general experience. But some of the other games, you can actually tell an entire narrative through just characters and storytelling through visuals, and make it even interactive, make them feel a part of it, and make it more relatable. The other thing you can even do is, if teaching is one of the core purpose of it through games, and people generally tend to learn better through games because it stays in their memory, it doesn't feel like it's been force fed. So that's another thing. I mean, with the mobile platform, with tracking and all of that, you can literally teach them alphabets, like they can write it off their tablets. So in both ways, I think it's great. Like I said, I don't think I have the right answer to this question, but I definitely feel that games are a platform that can go beyond any language barrier. Today, I can pick up a game that doesn't is not English or not in a language I understand, but I think I'll still be able to play through it if I know the basic movement, and I'll still be able to enjoy it. Goes back to what I said about games are like dreams. But it'll be a different experience for me altogether than intended, but that's the fun for games, right? Like that's exactly why it exists.
Thank you so much. And I believe that's the end of the questions. Thank you so much, everyone. And Poornima, once again, thank you for joining us on this new webinar. It was an absolute pleasure having you. And we hope we will see you around soon. And thank you so much, everyone, for staying. We have a very short announcement to make because we are hosting another webinar on April 13th. And that's what we're showing on screen. I'm going to switch into Spanish so that everyone can follow. El martes 13 de abril a las 20 horas horario Argentina, vamos a contar con la presencia de Cocos. Nos van a contar un poquito sobre Cocos Creator 3.0. Antonio Flores, el Senior Business Development de Cocos, va a charlar con la comunidad y presentarnos el nuevo engine para desarrollar juegos 3D. Así que los esperamos a todos y a todas en ese espacio. Thank you so much, Poornima, once again. Sorry, I'm messing your name every single time. I'm so sorry.
Don't worry about it.
So I hope that you had a nice time with us, and it was wonderful having you. Hope to see you again in the space, or maybe at the EVA at the end of the year. So
yes, let's hope so. Let's hope we are in a better situation pandemic wise for everyone's safety. Thank you so much for having me. It was a pleasure. Thank you, Miguel. Thank you, Florencia. Thank you, everyone, for attending and for all the lovely questions. Thank you for listening to me patiently. I really, really enjoyed being here. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Take care and see you next time. Muchas gracias a todos y a todas. Que tengan buen día. Chao.
Ciao.